Ladies and gentlemen, it's gone 4 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Welcome to this meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee here in County Hall on Tuesday, the 1st of October. Apologies for absence. Have we had any apologies for absence today?
Yes, Chair, I've received apologies from Councillors Darwin and Foster.
Darwin and Foster, 2 apologies. Councillor Dodd as well. 3 apologies. Minutes of the previous meeting, minutes of the Strategic Planning Committee held here on Tuesday the 6th of August. They've been circulated. Are the committee happy that they're true record? Thank you. Have any of the members of the committee got any disclosures they'd like to declare? No declarations of interest? Thank you. So we come to determination of planning applications. And as is the form, I will just roughly run through what happens at a strategic planning meeting. I, as chair, introduce the item, ask members if they've seen any site videos. Our planning officer then gives us any updates, any changes to the recommendations, and presents the report. We then have a public speaking section, 5 minutes for objectors, 5 minutes for a local member, county councillor, parish councillor, and then 5 minutes for an applicant or a supporter. We then have members' questions to the planning officer, and then we debate the application. I ask for a proposal, ask for that to be seconded, and then we take the debate, and it's a majority decision. So, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, without any further ado, we just have one application before us today, quite a big, a meaty application, and that is on page 25. And it's a proposal to demolish all existing buildings at the former Benfield Motors Garage site, Hillgate, Morpeth, and to construct a residential care home and care apartments with associated car parking and landscaping. And I'm now going to ask our planning officer, Judith Murphy, to take us through her report. Judith, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So before we begin the presentation, there are quite a number of updates that I need to inform you all about. So the first one is, within the report, you will see under the consultee responses, civil contingencies have submitted an objection to the flood evacuation plan. So following on from the publication of the officer report, the applicant has provided additional information regarding the flood evacuation measures on site. Consultation was undertaken with the public health team and the civil contingencies team, who within their responses have still raised concerns regarding the flood evacuation measures on site. So to address this, we have considered that a condition may be appropriate, which I'll read to you now. Prior to the commencement of development, a risk management and operating procedures report shall be submitted to the local planning authority detailing precise evacuation measures in the event of flooding. Following written approval from the local planning authority, measures within the report must be implemented and adhered to for the lifetime of the development. The reason would be to ensure the safety of residents in accordance with policy WAT3 of the Northumberland Local Plan and the National Planning Policy Framework. It's just, you should also be aware that there has been quite a considerable amount of to and fro in between the contingencies team, ourselves, and the applicant. So this has all come quite late in the day, this condition, and the civil contingencies team, we've been trying to contact them to see if they were happy with that wording. They haven't been able to get back to us in time, so it's just to make you aware that they haven't finally agreed it. But because of that condition, it does alter the recommendation that's in your report, which would then read that the application would be minded to approve subject to a Section 106 agreement securing financial contributions to healthcare of 41,000 and open space of 10,000, and the additional conditions provided within the update. There are more which I'll go on to tell you about. And also for delegated authority to agree final wording of the flood evacuation condition to the Director of Planning and the Chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. Okay, so that's dealing with the flood evacuation condition. Another condition that we're looking to add is the development shall not exceed 105 units at any time, and the reason for that is in the interests of residential amenity in accordance with the National Planning Policy Framework. A further condition to add is in relation to materials, which would read, prior to the commencement of development, a schedule of the types and colours of all materials to be used on the external elevations of the proposed development shall be made available for inspection and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The development shall not be constructed other than with these approved materials thereafter. The reason, in the interests of the satisfactory appearance of the development upon completion and in accordance with the provisions of policy QOP1 of Northumberland Local Plan. Then referring to condition 2 in your report, which is the plan's condition, there are 2 documents to be added, which is the design and access statement dated 2023 and a planning statement dated October 2023. One other final condition that we would look to add is in relation to heritage, and that reads, prior to any demolition on site, a programme of building recording and analysis shall be undertaken by a person or body approved by the local planning authority and shall be in accordance with a written scheme of investigation approved in writing by the local planning authority. The programme of historic building recording shall be in line with Level 2 of Historic England's 2016 guidance document, Understanding Historic Buildings, a Guide to Good Recording Practice. This requirement shall apply to 12 Castle Square and 9 to 11 Hillgate within the site. The reason, the site is of archaeological and historic interest, and the development shall result in the loss of heritage assets and a reduction in significance, so historic building record is required in accordance with policy ENV 7 of Northumberland Local Plan and paragraph 211 of the National Planning Policy Framework. So that's all the updates to the conditions. I do have some other updates. It's been noted in the report that it refers to 56 units under the subheading of open space under planning obligations directly under planning paragraph 7.73 of your report. Just to make members aware that we're not talking about 56 units, we're looking at 105 units, so that's a typo. But the agreed figure within that paragraph of 10,000 for the open space is still correct. Another last update, I think. Since the report has been published, we've also received some commentary from our heritage officer stating that some of the wording within the report needs to be clarified. So in relation to paragraph 7.37, it should be clarified that the views of the heritage officers are that the application will cause harm to the conservation area due to the fact that the scale, massing and design are incongruous, unsympathetic to the character of the conservation area. The impact on the setting of the listed buildings and structures is an entirely separate point and should not be conflated. So just to make you aware of that. And also just to clarify that whilst the reports state within the consultee comments responses again that the conservation response is one of less than substantial harm, it's just to make clear that their submission was actually an objection to the proposal. So that's all the updates, Chair. I'll go on to the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, there we go. So, as you've heard, the application is for the demolition of all the existing buildings within the site's application boundary and construction of a residential care home and care apartments with associated car parking and landscaping. So the site is located next to the Waterford Lodge in Morpeth, which is one of the gateways into the town centre from the south. It's slightly set back from the main road, but visible and is arguably more noticeable because of its current rundown and dilapidated condition. The site is also located within Morpeth's conservation area. So this is an existing and proposed site plan. So the one on the left is the site as is now. This is the Waterford Lodge here. And then this is a site plan of what is being proposed. So the care home would comprise 105 ensuite apartments, which would be made up of 81 one-bed and 24 suites. 16 of those would be one bed and 8 would be two beds, self-contained apartments with private living room and kitchenette. There will be communal and staff spaces and an outdoor terrace on the 3rd floor. The building itself would vary from 3 to 5 stories in height. It would also include a cafe lounge bar area, communal lounges and dining rooms, activity space, hair salon, treatment room, a cinema and games room. In terms of employment, the development would bring 90 full-time equivalent jobs. With regards to parking, this is proposed to be a 20-space car park, which you can see just here on the screen, 2 of which will be designated disabled bays, plus 2 separate disabled parking drop-off bays at the north end, which is just here next to the entrance to the development. So these are the existing street elevations, as is now. This is the Waterford Lodge here. And this is a view from the north. And these are the proposed street elevations, so the same views. So again, this is really taken from the main road, looking towards Waterford Lodge and towards development, and again from the north. So I'll just run through what these proposed elevations are. So this one here is the rear of the building from the west. This one here is a side elevation from the south. To the bottom, this is the front corner of the building on the southern end. Now these two sketches here, the first 2 of them are elevations predominantly looking into the site, and the last can be seen from the main road to the front and is one of the northern end gables. This one here faces east, so towards the main road, but this elevation would be sat behind the Waterford Lodge. And the last one, again, an internal facing wall on the northern part of the building running parallel to the side of the Waterford Lodge. These are just some proposed ground floor plans and roof plan there. So the ground floor on bottom and the roof plan. This is just a plan of the 3rd floor. You can't really see too much detail, but it's just to show where the cafe, terrace, patio area and the activity games area would be. So these are some visuals of what the site would predominantly look like if built. So again, this is the front, this is where the Waterford Lodge is at the moment, and then obviously it loops around all sides towards the rear of the Waterford Lodge as well. This is an image of the front elevation, so that's the north side. So the main road kind of running through Morpeth, it's alongside here, leading to the bridge. And then this would be, again, taken from the main road, passing the site, looking in towards where the car parking area would be. So that's set back, again, sort of behind and to the south of the Waterford Lodge. So members will see from the report that the proposal hasn't come without some concerns raised, many of those relating to the scale and massing of the building and the impact that they will have on the conservation area and setting of the neighbouring listed buildings and structures. Just to add some context around how an application like this is assessed when there are some conflicts, these are considered in the round of the overall planning balance of the scheme, so whether the benefits outweigh the harm that the report talks about. In this case, and taking full account of the benefits versus the harm situation, it's considered that the new building would significantly enhance the appearance of the site within the conservation area when compared to what's there now. And that is something that weighs quite heavily in its favour, but wouldn't necessarily be the sole purpose for granting planning permission. When considering its conservation area setting, policy ANV 7 of the local plan describes that development proposals that would result in substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset will not be supported unless it can be demonstrated that the substantial harm or total loss is necessary to achieve substantial benefits that would outweigh that harm. We do have one of our heritage officers here today who can answer any detailed questions. However, as I've mentioned, it is acknowledged that a degree of harm has been identified by the heritage officer as less than substantial. So this is considered when coming to a recommendation in the balance of the public benefit. Those public benefits being for the older and vulnerable generation in the form of providing modern well-equipped accommodation, which will offer access to services and essential facilities for the residents, which is also something that is supported by Housing Policy HOU 11 of the local plan. There will be a financial contribution towards healthcare of 41,000 and towards open space of 10,000. It's also acknowledged that the adult services have commented that there isn't a need for this level of provision in Morpeth. However, this is a private development and it's not local authority led. The other benefit, as I've mentioned, is of course the redevelopment of a severely run-down site that has become something of an eyesore over the years. So just before I sum up, it's just to show you a couple more plans. There's a landscaping plan there, which just gives you an indication of the landscaping that will surround the site. And some site photographs of the site as it is now. So it's facing the west from the adjacent footpath. Internal views of the site. Application facing east from the adjacent footpath. Partial views of site from the adjacent highway. And partial view of the site facing north and then facing southwest from the adjacent highway. Okay. So just get rid of that. Yeah, so just in summing up, the concerns raised have all been carefully considered with all of the merits and constraints of the proposal informing the planning balance of the proposal. The conclusion is that the benefits of the scheme would bring to this site in Morpeth and to the ageing population, which is finely balanced, but they do outweigh the negative aspects and the less than substantial harm identified as discussed. The recommendation is therefore that members are minded to approve, subject to a Section 106 agreement securing financial contributions to healthcare 41,000 and open space 10,000, and the additional conditions provided within the updates are provided, and also delegated authority to agree final wording of the flood evacuation condition given to the Director of Planning and the Chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, we now come to our public speaking slot. We've got somebody speaking as an objector, Kim Bibby Wilson, and we've also got two people speaking in support, Catherine Pimbold and Thomas Foster. Kim Bibby Wilson, would you like to take the slot for 5 minutes, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Councillors, on behalf of Northern Aquarian Society, which has 60 members, I thank you for this chance to reinforce the points made in our letter. This is your chance and your duty to get this right and be hailed by future generations for agreeing on a proportionate and appropriate proposal for this visually important entrance to Morpeth, ensuring the town remains welcoming, attractive and functional for residents, workers and visitors now and for years to come. As it currently stands, we have to object to this application because of the detrimental impact of its overkill scale and any town design upon Morpeth's earliest scheduled monument, the Har Hill, fortified to overlook the valley virtually 1,000 years ago, and also upon the sensitive environment of our distinctive conservation area, linked to commitments in the local neighbourhood plan to protect the town's character, with this site and related vistas, of course, being on the heritage route and the archaeology of the original river crossing and the Great North Road. Rest assured that while the original conclusion of this technical sliding scale definition of less than substantial harm, or maybe it's now substantial, I've lost track, might sound attractive as a get-out clause, it assumes that on balance, the employment and ephemeral market forces picture is rosier than we believe and outweighs any heritage concerns, but it actually is a statement and a confession that while the plan doesn't reach the most severe level of damage, it doesn't say there would be no harm. This proposal as it stands is harmful to our heritage. See paragraph 7.37 and 7.38 of today's report. Any argument that anything is better than old garages that have not been kept watertight and so allowed to fall into ruin, is not an excuse for accepting the wrong anything, such as a rather large, inappropriate and arguably uninspiring structure in a key location. The proposed development is surely at least one story too high overall, detracting seriously from the view of two scheduled monuments, the Harhill and Morpeth Castle, particularly from Castle Square and from the Chantry footbridge with its medieval piers. The various elevations and computer-generated and artists' impressions do somewhat conflict with each other and don't really show the full impact of towering blocks which will obstruct the present clear view of the Harhill summit behind the Waterford Hotel, as currently seen from the ground, not halfway up in the air, from Goose Hill area. The claims that 2 new vistas will be opened up by new side access lanes are a little exaggerated and were criticised in earlier reports by your conservation officers. Quoting examples in the report, the plan, of other tall blocks in the built-up town centre hardly justifies dwarfing the domestic scale buildings of the southwest hypotenuse of Castle Square, which for those who don't know, it's actually a triangle, and those on Wansbeck Street and Hillgate beyond. The modern lofty William Turner Court on the opposite side of Castle Square sadly already blocks the riverside view there, though this should not be taken as a precedent, but a mistake not to be repeated. Significantly, it's currently advertising vacant retirement apartments, indicating a questionable demand for any more such commercial flats. Your own officer's reports state there's no great evidence of extra need for special care provision, paragraph 7.15 to 17 of your reports. That suggests the proposed care home element could soon convert perhaps into further commercial apartments, making the claim of providing extra permanent jobs in a care setting less valid. So the overall height of the plans could well be reduced at this stage to prevent wasteful over-provision. Much is made of the attractive view of the park in the plan from the top levels and balconies for the new occupants, but the reverse view from the tranquil end of the park towards the town would be severely curtailed by an unnecessarily tall block. Morpeth's attraction for visitors and residents depends to a significant extent on the park, the open, unspoiled aspect of the riverside areas, and Castle Square's traditional unimpeded view of the courthouse and Harhill. Modifying the plan by scaling down, at the very least for those 2 higher blocks, is a brilliant compromise solution, providing public benefits of a more balanced aesthetic amenity, some immediate jobs and perhaps responding to demand, but without creating a partial white elephant. This would still tidy up a sadly neglected site and avoid what Historic England says does harm to our heritage.
Straight 5 minutes. Thank you. And now I'd like Catherine Pimble and Thomas Foster. You do realise you're sharing the 5 minutes. How are you going to divide those up?
I'll go first, yeah.
Fine. Over to you, sir.
Thanks. Just with one mic, is it all right for you? Let's allow time to change.
Should I show them below?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. The former Benfield Motors site, which is the subject of this application, has been derelict since 2012, when the dealership closed and the site began prior to the purchase of the site by the applicant. It was described as an eyesore by local residents and people who are familiar with the site. The building conservation officer has even stated that the site as present contributes negatively to the heritage significance of the Morpeth Conservation Area. The applicant acquired the site in 2014 and since then has sought to redevelop the site and has worked closely with the local planning authority. During this time, a total of 3 pre-planning applications have been submitted and public consultations have been held. The proposed scheme is the culmination of the responses received during this process, which has resulted in numerous schemes being discounted as non-viable prior to this one. The site is a brownfield site, and as highlighted in the comprehensive site investigation report submitted, this site, as a result of its former use as a garage and filling station, will require a significant amount of remediation to remove contaminated materials. These include historic buried fuel tanks and associated contaminated earth material, as well as buried asbestos and other similar items. And this is important to consider as it impacts the viability of any development. As I mentioned, there's been a significant amount of work involved over the last decade. We've worked closely with local planning authority and held public consultations to develop the proposed scheme, which is sensitive to the surroundings. And to quote just a couple of statutory consultative responses, the proposed development is a definite improvement, and Morpeth Town Council said they would welcome a sensitive redevelopment of a derelict brownfield and quay site. And I believe these comments are reflective in the overwhelming public support of comments on the application and responses received. The UK has an ageing population. Over the last decade, the over 65 population has grown by 19%, and in the same period, older persons accommodation has grown by just 3%. This development provides much needed accommodation for older persons, which we've identified in the needs assessment, which is submitted with the planning application. And given its location, it allows older persons to maintain strong links with the community. Therefore, not only will this development redevelop an eyesore brownfield site, it will provide much needed older persons accommodation. Thanks for listening. I'll pass it over to Catherine.
So following the results of the previous pre-planning applications, this scheme meaningfully commenced in March 2022. Throughout the last 2.5 years, ourselves and the client team have worked extensively with your planning officers in regular design review meetings, which included a presentation at the Morpeth Council Forum. We have also engaged with the public at a number of public consultation events. At each design stage, your officers have been involved, from initial building massing through detailed design to finer detail, including discussions on materials and finishes. Throughout the process, we have taken on board comments from your officers, consultees and wider stakeholders. The aim was to design a building which varied in form, scale and mass and had interest to its modulation reflective of the town centre of Morpeth. It was critical from the outset that the main built-in frontages facing Castle Square and Hillgate reflected the proportions of the surrounding neighbouring buildings. The combination of stepping form, roof accommodation and the flat roof keeps the mass down, respecting and reflecting the neighbouring buildings while retaining key views within the conservation area. The architectural language and high quality materials draw upon the immediate conservation area context. This design demonstrates a traditional styling but with a modern reflection, picking up on traditional details and proportions from neighbouring buildings while some elements have a modern take. The site location was a big driver of the design too. Overlooking the river and neighbouring Carlisle Park was an important factor to draw upon for room accommodation and window positions, maximising potential views from within the building to Carlisle Park, Har Hill and the proposed extensive landscape gardens within the development. The careful placement of the proposed buildings offered potential views within the conservation area at street level, which are not currently available. A key example of this being the view of Har Hill from Castle Square. The proposal ultimately offers you an opportunity to enhance a brownfield site, which currently only has a detrimental effect on the setting of nearby heritage assets and is a detracting element within the conservation area, and replaces this with a proposed high-quality, attractive new care development from a committed development team. We hope you will support your officer's recommendation to approve the scheme.
Members of the committee, we now have an opportunity to ask questions to our planning officers. Any members of the planning committee got questions they'd like to ask? Councillor Hill.
Thank you. What I just wanted to ask is, did you say and could I hear that the conservation is objecting? His views objective, so it would be to hear from you if I could. And just on this, less than substantial harm and this balance, you would kind of automatically think there's a lot of positive weighting to the nature of this application. And you'd kind of automatically think that there's an increasing demand for it. But it says here that the Adult Service NTC say there's a lack of need. Is there any sort of figures or anything you can give more, explain about do we need this?
Fine.
that's a very insightful question. And there is a policy in the plan, and I'll draw your attention to 7.19 paragraph. Okay. And what that says is policy HOU 11 of the local plan talks about where you are to grant these, there's a need for them, and that needs to be evidenced particularly. Okay, right. Okay. Right. In this, though, we need to look at the role of need in a planning discussion. Normally what we say is that if there's an overriding need for it, that can be used to outweigh other elements of harm. And actually one of the speakers' comments, the objective speakers who talked about this being a potential white elephant, actually hit the nail on the head here. Right? Our adult care teams think actually that we've probably got enough capacity in Morpeth at the moment. Okay, right. What actually the decision facing you is that we are not basing the decision here by having a hook into policy HOU 11. That's why it's set out clearly here that there are many other benefits to do with this scheme. And where we were going to be basing this on that justification, we would limit this development only for use for the use proposed, which is supported living. Right? We are not. So the argument that there's actually, if the market changes, as it always does in adult care, such that this was to become a block of conventional residential flats, that we are not seeking to prevent, because actually that would be a good outcome for Morpeth as well, because actually the views of the town council initially were that this is a brownfield site. The discussions so far demonstrate how complex it has been. The fact it's been effectively in discussions with planning for many, many years through various iterations to come to a design. So it is not being promoted on the basis of outstanding need. It's saying that the totality of the recommendation adds up to one of support. So, and the evidence for that is that we are not seeking to restrict it only to this use. It's the fact that if this became flats or this proposed use, that will be acceptable. Okay, that's, yeah. So we have to remember the point that the existence of need is a reason for granting something, but the absence of need, much like we looked at other issues of commercial competition, is not a reason to refuse in itself. Okay, the need gives you the ability to outweigh harm, but the absence of need isn't a reason for refusal in itself. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a complex one, Councillor Hill, because actually the market needs to find itself in how it provides for adult care facilities, and we can look at what the need is, but the absence of additional need in this context shouldn't be regarded as a reason in itself for refusal.
That's bad. It was just interesting because what basis? But it doesn't sound like it's critical in the weighing up. But what basis did they decide there isn't a need? Because I think there is, and there's more people that need to move to this type of accommodation. They almost moved too late, rather than that sort of stepping stone. So, but I just wondered what they were hanging on to say there wasn't a need.
Yeah, and this is an interesting issue, right? I suppose the heart of this is that you ask is the numerical evidence. And the numerical evidence, just counting how many bed spaces we've got in a Morpeth today, would suggest that there's not a pressing need for additional capacity. What that numerical analysis doesn't give you is choice and the argument that tastes change and actually more elderly people could move to Morpeth. So in the case of the objective need at the moment, there isn't a shortfall in Morpeth, but actually this is differentiating the market. And then we can talk about the site issues later on. But before we get more questions, I think this will be a question from several of you. The point made by the applicant's agents is this has indeed, I can confirm, been through several iterations of design for us to try and get to something which basically is a compromise between getting a long-standing brownfield site on a really visible location on the main entrance into Morpeth resolved, and to try and balance these tensions. And this is a good example of where it is impossible to satisfy every element of that in terms of economics, viability, and come up with a scheme that works. And hence, that's why, in a healthy market like Morpeth, this site has stood vacant for more than a decade.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, thank you. There was an objection from my team due to the design, the form, the scale massing, detailing materials of the proposed development, not, in our view, not preserving or enhancing the conservation area. We are supportive of the principle of redevelopment, obviously, because it is an eyesore. There was also an objection due to the identified harm to the setting of the Grade 2 listed 13 Castle Square, which is the red brick building adjacent to the 18th century building that would be demolished. And that's another reason for an objection, because that is the loss of two historic buildings that do make a positive contribution to the character and appearance of the conservation area. One of which, now 9 to 17 Hillgate, I do not think it still has been robustly justified by the applicant. It does need to be beyond economic repair to demolish a building that makes a positive contribution to the conservation area, and that's not been demonstrated. So there's quite a few different points of objection within that objection. There are a few different types of less than substantial harm to different heritage assets.
Thank you. And I was just wondering, for the members, if you would go through, for me, the various levels of harm, the sort of, is there 3 levels? Norm?
There's 2, yeah.
There's 2 levels, well, 3 with no harm. So we can identify no harm, which is to preserve or conserve, and then less of substantial harm, and substantial harm, which also kind of crosses with total loss as well, because it is a very high test. Substantial harm is quite rare, really, when it comes to planning applications. It would be, for example, the demolition of a listed building, that would be substantial harm. Because this is an important part of the conservation area, it is less of substantial harm to do with regard to the impact on the conservation area. When it comes to the impact on the setting, that's again less of substantial harm, because, well, that's kind of difficult to quantify, but I think sometimes harm to setting is often more likely to be less of substantial, because it's still preserving the historic fabric, hopefully, of the listed building. So yes, there's 2 important categories, and they have different tests that need to be applied. So as Judith was saying, the less of substantial harm needs to be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, with great weight being given to the conservation of the heritage assets.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you very much. That was useful.
Councillor
Hutchinson, you're next.
Thank you. Morpeth is a really busy place, and parking is a premium. I'm concerned that there may not be an adequate parking for the number of flats proposed.
Yeah.
Are you confident that there is?
Yes, I can answer this one. And I'll ask actually Matthew to try and get what I'm going to say. This is a town centre location. Its redevelopment for residential purposes would be common to any scheme, you know. So what we'll be looking at here, the principle is okay. Since we've been talking to this landowner, the Goose Hill car park, which is directly opposite this site, which has both short stay and long stay car parking, has been added on to Morpeth's provision. And I'll just reiterate that from a layout, the access is acceptable. And actually, if you were going to promote a location where you didn't need a car as much as elsewhere, Morpeth, with both a railway station, a bus station, and all the services there, would be that location. Can I just bring Matthew in to talk?
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Yeah, I very much agree. I mean, policy TRA4, which is the parking standards policy, very much says that, you know, where you are in a sustainable location, where there are alternatives available, then a reduction on a maximum or a minimum figure are acceptable. And in this situation, we are in that. We're in the town centre location, sustainably connected. You know, even things like there's a major supermarket within the town centre, where, you know, other towns will have them on the edge of the town. So there's a lot of services and facilities whereby you don't need to own a car and there is some provision for those that feel they need to. And if there is overspill from that car park, if it's over demand, there are existing restrictions around that area to address highway safety issues, and there's public car parking available around the town, all within reasonable walking distance from the site.
Thank you.
Could I come back on that one,
Yes.
please? With respect, I've travelled in Morpeth quite a bit, and the car parks are always full. It's very, very difficult to find a parking place in Morpeth in the best of times. I know the supermarkets is a large car park there, and the car park opposite as well. But I've tried in both places to park. There's the one just over the bridge on the right, and they're always full the whole time. So I do really think there is an issue with parking.
And Matthew, on the back of Councillor Hutchinson's question, can I just ask about staff parking? How are we sort of accommodating the 90 people that are going to work
So
there
the-
that are travelling?
The 22 spaces are not specifically designated for staff, visitors, or or even occupants. And certainly the transport statement talked to more of those that would be there would have more mobility issues and therefore are less likely to own a car. So that sort of 22 space car park, 20 space car park is there for general use for the development, with the publicly available car parking outside.
Yep.
Should the demand not be met.
But there is going to be a sort of, liaison with the operators about transport and...
So, as part of the commitments within the transport statement submitted, the applicant was committed to travel plan welcome pack. So it's very much encouraging staff, telling them the options that are available to them, and that's secured through conditioned staff and visitors as well, and even occupiers to say, if you're going to come and visit me, these are some of the travel options that are available to you.
Yeah. Lessen the pressure on those spaces that are available.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Chair, in the theoretical world, I would support what the top table's saying. In the real world, I support what Councillor Hutchinson's saying. Can I ask the question? There will be care provider because this is a care home. Does anybody realise a care worker may be asked to go and visit Mrs. X at 9 o'clock, and that care worker will get paid till 9:30? Not from when they find a car parking space at 25 to 9, not at 10 past 10 when they get to the next client, but they'll be paid from 9:30. I say that from years of experience in that trade. Joe Public wishes to park in the sitting room, not in a car park across the road in Morpeth where you've got to wait for the traffic lights to change to let you across. That's the reality. And 90 carers, possibly I doubt it'll be 90 carers, but 20 parking spaces. We had this situation in Bedlington. Councillor Robinson will explain it better than me, where we give parking for 7 vehicles. 7 vehicles for a care home, because that's all they would need. Go to Bedlington any time of the day and watch the vehicles parked bumper to bumper on double yellow lines. Because them youngsters, them carers are doing their job for what they get paid for. They will work extra. And by the way, we all know there's a national shortage of carers, so they won't be putting their jobs in jeopardy, mind. And it just... I will support this scheme, which I'll be asked for later to do, but I am very concerned that we aren't taking care of the carers.
Yeah, can I just come with that? Yeah. I think we should be really clear on this scheme. This is a wholly private enterprise, and it won't be utilising county council staff. Okay, so that's the first point. And the second one is that, remember, members, that following what came out of the National Planning Policy Framework in its first version, to refuse applications on highways grounds, there has to be an identified severe impact, okay? And that's the real test here, okay? Here, what we're saying is that if you take a step back from this and say there's on-site parking, and within the timescale that this application has been discussed in this version, we have the new Goose Hill one opposite, And it may be tricky at certain times of the day, but equally though, I can say I've been to Goose Hill and found somewhere to park every single time I've been there, okay? But that's just anecdotal, okay? We have to look at the formal position of the Highways Authority, because sometimes we will rely on their evidence when they say there is severe impact to refuse a scheme, and that has to stand up as appeal. Likewise, when they say there isn't a severe impact, we can't say, well, we don't accept that position because it doesn't suit a particular narrative. Okay, so there is no evidence that this will cause a severe impact. And I would finally say that out of all the locations in the county, if you're talking about sustainable transport opportunities, in terms of a railway station, a bus station, and all the services that are present, that this is probably an example of where, if we are going to be promoting less car use, this is one of the opportunities in the county where we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions for Judith, but Rob's thrown one up for me in one of his addresses. You said you look, if it happens, you look favourable on residential apartments. I don't know if I'm happy about that. If we pass this for a care home, I have a different set of specific questions if it was apartments.
Yeah.
You know, there's different, I'd certainly have a different pair of glasses on.
Yeah. Yeah, can I make that point clear here? To change it to be residential would require planning permission.
It would come back.
Yes, it would
That's
come back.
fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Judith, you said the entrance was at the north end of the building. I presume that's the one facing the river.
But sort of opposite where the joiners is on that side?
Yes,
Yes. Yeah.
So the other entrance, which takes you into the courtyard parking setting, there isn't a main entrance there.
No.
So everybody that goes into that main entrance has to walk, really.
Sorry, I'm getting a nod from the agent there. I think there is actually an entrance at the south side as well.
There would be?
Yes.
Right, fine. The only other question I've got then is the 106 agreement looks a bit late. 50,000, 40 and 10.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, can I just comment on this? And almost I'm going to repeat the answer I gave a few moments ago. This site has stood empty for a long time. The redevelopment of former garage sites is unusually difficult because of the ground conditions and the expense, therefore. We've looked at this and there's been a huge back and forth to reach this level of agreement on the potential Section 106. And this is as far as, it appears to us that this is as far as we're going to get without us throwing the scheme into jeopardy. We haven't just accepted this, immediately, because the redevelopment costs, again, I'll say it, is the reason why this, site, which is a high-profile site in Morpeth, has stood empty for so long, because of the costs associated. And it is an unusually shaped site as well when you look at it. In fact, it wraps around the back of the pub, has made it, a very expensive site to deliver.
Well, what seemed to have history? I mean, the big one across the road is built on an ex-garage site. There's one in Badlington built on an ex-garage site. So we would have known all this information when we're negotiating with it.
Yeah, we did, yeah, we do, yes, yeah. And that gives us the way that the local plan sets out the expectations of 106 contributions, okay? And when we went through the examination in public and we set down the policies for developer contributions, it was pitched at the point that 80% of schemes should be able to deliver at that level of contribution. It's not 100%. There's a clear space and there is a viability problems on certain difficult sites. And this unquestionably is a difficult site. Okay.
However, if it comes back for apartments, there's no way I'm going to accept 50k. That's 106 on it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely
Yeah.
no way.
We would rerun the viability exercise. And actually, then you'd be into affordable housing as well, then, if it was a residential scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. So my question regards the demolition phase. This is a highly congested area at the best of times. This is a complex site to demolish as well. So it's just with regards to site access, what happens during this demolition phase, because it is just a little bit of a worry that we are on a very busy road at the best of times, and how long in the disruption, and also for the existing business at the Waterford Lodge. Having worked in hospitality, these are two conflicting businesses, let's say. So how can we reassure that the existing business in that area and the other nearby aren't going to be affected during demolition, and also long term as well, with complaints about licensing?
Yeah, right. Good question again. I'll draw attention to condition 10, which is unusually long and potentially cumbersomely written, but there's a condition which is about a construction environmental management plan to impact various things, including impacts on wildlife. So that would need to be approved. Yeah, and there's another, so there's condition 10, and then there's... Yeah, and then there's condition 18, which is the further demolition and construction method statement, which includes requirements for details of traffic management measures, parking of vehicles and operatives, loading and unloading of planted materials, and other issues. So, in the past, we wouldn't have put those conditions on, but practice has shown, as you said, that the actual construction phase can be the most disruptive element of a scheme like this. So it is covered by condition.
On that, can we make sure there's some kind of notification, because the school is directly opposite as well? So I'm just like school access and stuff during, in the morning, people are using that road, and I just the previous
the school
I know that site's gone, but that is a main route.
What we'll do is, this is a requirement for them to submit a construction and demolition management plan. We would look at that, and if we think, actually talking to highways, there's a need for them not to start at certain times or finish at certain times, then we can include that in it. Okay, Matthew, do you want to just comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a usual recommended condition, especially in constrained sites as this. We'll take a view with whatever's submitted as to whether it's acceptable or not. Missing things like network peaks, school peaks. There's almost going to be very much almost like a very urban city centre. Yeah. I'm not going to say London-esque, but you know what I mean. It's a very constrained, very tight site, and it's those kind of measures that they need to look to not have to minimise that impact during peak hours in particular, and getting park and ride for off-site operatives, so they're parking well outside of the town, etc. But all of that is secured by that condition, and we'll look at it when it's submitted.
And the existing businesses?
The construction and demolition plan will look at impact on amenity as well, and so really the totality of all the provisions in that will be geared around making sure that there won't be unacceptable impact. This is often a finely balanced one, and we have this up and down the county, is there's a balance between getting the construction work done as quickly as possible to minimise impact on business, at the same time not doing it in a way which involves them working excessive hours, which also has an impact on businesses. So it's a case of us balancing those two competing requirements out. Yeah. Can I just say, Chair, if I may, lots of the issues we're talking about are broadly on two grounds here. We are talking about the redevelopment of this site in a town centre location, and we're talking about this particular scheme. Lots of issues like that issue would be common to any redevelopment of a site like this. And with the Chair's indulgence, I'll suggest that the actual redevelopment of this site isn't a difficult decision. It's whether this scheme is the right one. Okay.
Thank you. Martin, you've got a question?
Thank you, Chair. The flood evacuation plan. It's slightly concerning that obviously this has been coming forward for 12 years, I think, and we got to the point where we're making a decision on it and we haven't actually got a proper nod on the evacuation plan. Obviously, for a care home, probably short of a hospital, probably the worst case scenario for a flood event. So what's concerned me slightly, obviously we've got the condition, that's good. What's concerned me slightly is there's going to be a lot of pressure on that condition. If we give this the green nod, the nod today, there's going to be a lot of pressure on that condition going through, otherwise, you know, there's going to be a potential appeal or whatever on the condition. So what confidence can you give us that that is going to be properly dealt with?
Yeah, and again, I must stop saying this. That is an equally good question. Right, okay. Part of the reason why this has come late in the day is as we refine our approach to issues, and particularly we are now doing a thing called health impact assessment on applications, and this is part of the County Council's overall approach to health inequality. And the team in the department who handles storms, etc., has also been refining its approach. So this has come out as a new way of working, comparatively late in the genesis of this scheme. Okay. What we want to achieve isn't just the fact that there's going to be an efficient way of evacuating the building if there's a flood event. Asterix, even though the flood defence works in Morpeth, hopefully have diminished that risk. It's also, though, that won't put a burden on the public sector emergency relief functions. Okay, right. To answer your final point is, what will happen here is that the precise wording of that in a scheme to come in, like a construction and demolition plan, we will look at. And if we think the balance cannot be achieved, that we support that, this will have to come back to committee. Okay? But otherwise, if we can achieve an acceptable balance, myself and the chair will agree it. But to be clear, that is not a fait accompli. It needs to be done properly, and if it can't, it will come back. Okay?
Yes, certainly.
Thanks.
Members of the committee, any more questions this afternoon? No? Just one from the chair, Judith. Obviously, a care home with 105 units is going to be a big structure. And our objector this afternoon was saying that in terms of height and massing, you know, this is a big structure to sort of shoehorn in round our heritage assets. Mm-hmm. And are you, as a sort of planning team, happy with, you know, obviously you've had 2 or 3 goes at this, trying to agree something that you might find is acceptable, but do you think we've done everything we can to come up with a solution that's not going to be too detrimental to the heritage assets?
I mean, it has been a really challenging scheme to deal with, and I think it all comes down to that fine balance, that planning balance that we have to consider. You know, we do have the conservation objection, coupled with the benefits that the scheme does provide. So it's really trying to sort of meet in the middle somewhere. Ideally, yes, that probably would have preferred that to be, the massing to be slightly less. But, you know, we've talked about that with the agents, and it is really a case of all things considered, you know, where that balance sits, you know, which way it tips. And we feel we've come to a point where we're satisfied enough to be able to swing that balance, if you like, in its favour rather than against, notwithstanding the conservation concerns.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, if I may, I'll just add on, this is really unusual, this scheme, in that normally when we get applications in, the design comes in, there's some back and forth, and we agree on a scheme that can be recommended for approval. Here, we've had numerous iterations of schemes which simply have not made the balance, and it has included schemes which have been bigger, with more massing, and more blocky sense to it. This is the final product of what I would regard as an exhaustive approach for us to try and get a scheme that is financially viable, sees this site cleared up and delivers, you know, what we think is good quality here. The whole point, which has been really underscored by today's debate, is that has not been an easy process. And this is definitely not a case of they submitted this design and we said, yes, that looks okay. You know, this has been a cycle of trying to get something which fits. And I do generally worry that if not this scheme, that it is perhaps convenient to say, well, another scheme will come along when we have been given it. You know, out of all the applications we've dealt with since I've been here, certainly, this has had the most work done on design to try and balance it. Okay.
Thank you. So, members of the committee, if there are no more questions, would someone like to make a proposal? Councillor Hutchinson?
I'm still extremely worried about the parking situation, but as has been said by officers, it's going to be all right. So with that, I would propose the officer recommendation with the relevant conditions being changed, added to, etc., etc. I just hope I don't come, if this is approved, I hope I don't come back and say, told you so.
Yep.
Thank you. Minded to approve. Is that seconded? Seconded by Councillor Gordon-Stewart. Members of the committee, your opportunity for debate this afternoon. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Chair, I still have some reservations, but I'm a lot more assured after Rob Murphy and Matthew's comments. Although I have a worry that Matthew's beard will be grey while they're constructing this, because I bring to mind the development at New Hartley, where we put conditions on for construction traffic not to be there till 9 o'clock in the morning. But at 6:30 in the morning, there was a line of 30-tonner HGVs at the paper shop, buying cups of tea, because it's human nature, the HGV driver, wants to get in as many runs as he can that day. When we look at the street scene, as Councillor Hutchinson's alluded to, past the Waterford, going in, it's very limited. We're given a condition of when to start at 9 in the morning for residential protection. There's not many residents in that area, but there's a lot of drivers in that area. And there's a lot of pedestrians in that. And there's a lot of school kids in that area transversing to various schools. And I think Matthew will be getting lots of phone calls from 6:30 in the morning as they start queuing up. You know, Chair, I know, every member in this room knows. We pray there's never a meeting on at 9 o'clock here at County Hall in Morpeth, because we'll come various routes to get here, via Kirkley Hall even, to get here from Bedlington. That's how bad that traffic is. But I'm sure that'll be monitored. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's not a unique problem. It's a problem that happens everywhere. It just seems to be exasperated in Morpeth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Anyone else like to speak this afternoon? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. There's obvious problems with the application. And once again, it'll come down to balance, benefits outweighing harm, etc. For me, I think the benefit does outweigh the harm. What I'm happy about, or what I'm content with, is there's 11 pages of conditions, plus the extra conditions that we heard about. The officers are obviously going to oversee these conditions, hopefully. So I'm, you know, I take some sucker out of knowing that's going to happen, which helps me make my decision to support the application. But as I say, it's finely balanced. But at the end of the day, I think the benefit to this scheme does outweigh the negatives. So I will support.
Thank you. Councillor Barry Flux.
Yeah, I thought I ought to speak because I still haven't made my mind up on this one, because I'm just really not convinced about the parking situation. We say it's a town centre, but realistically, people going to this care home, are they going to get a bus there? Are they going to get a train there? I don't think they are. They're going to drive there. Let's be frank about it. And okay, there is the Stob Hill, it's not Stob Hill, Goose Hill car park opposite. But you know, are they going to know about it? Are B going to even bother going in there, or just going to go circling round and round and round until they force their way into a parking space right beside it? I'm not convinced by it. It's not London. There aren't 3 tube stations and 3 bus routes and more than 3 bus routes, hundreds of bus routes going past it. I'm not convinced yet. I'm going to listen if there is any more debate, but I'm really just not convinced about this one, I've got to be honest.
Any more contributions? No, well, from the chair, I'll make a contribution. This is a very finely balanced application. You know, as the objector said, it's an eyesore. We'd all like to see that eyesore removed. And we as planners have got the job of making sure we put something attractive, pleasing to the eye there. And yes, there is less than substantial harm. So some harm to the heritage assets, but I think our planning team, in their discussions with the applicant, going back and forwards, have come up with something that is acceptable. And as a person, you know, I'm very fond of Morpeth. It's our shining star as far as market towns go. It's buzzing. The cafes, the restaurants, the shops. And I can't think of a better place to put a care home than so close to the centre of our vibrant town. It is, you know, it's the place to be, and hopefully the residents can, you know, feed on the services that, you know, our market town provides. And yes, you know, there are hang-ups with parking, but, you know, with the Goose Hill car park being immediately opposite, I hope that will dilute some of those. And again, one of the great things with this is, I think it's a much better use than the former site. We had a garage, car sales. Now we've got residential, less noise, less dirt, less pollution, and it is a very attractive place to live. And it is creating 90 jobs. So, yes, this application has my support. Councillor Hutchinson, if you speak, you round up the debate.
I thought everybody had finished.
Yes, I think
presume.
they have. I'm just reminding you.
Not to labour the point, but it's been brought up by a few people that parking is going to be a problem, or will be a problem. It's common sense, knowing Morpeth the way it is, it's common sense to see it's going to happen anyway. But unfortunately, early on in planning, I learned there was no such thing as common sense. It doesn't exist. So I'll agree with everything you've said. It will be a benefit to the town, etc., etc. It is going to be large. It's going to be visible. But we've got to have it for the reasons you've just said. So I'll be voting for it, but still worried about the parking.
Thank you. Yes, are you happy with the recommendation that we're minded to approve? Yeah. My legal officer here is going to read out chapter and verse.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, so the proposal in front of members is a recommendation, so minded to approve the application, subject to a 106 agreement to secure 2 contributions for, sorry, bear with me, 41,100 for healthcare and £10,000 for open space, subject to the conditions that are set out in your report and subject to the updated conditions that were set out at the start of the report. at the meeting, sorry, and subject to delegated authority to the Director of Planning and Housing in consultation with to finalise the wording in respect of the additional condition for the flood evacuation measures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yes.
You happy with those? Good. Members of the committee, all those in favour of this application, would you like to raise your hands? Those against? Those abstaining? One abstention, 11 in favour. That application is passed. Thank you. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, just one little bit of business. On pages 59 to 74, we have appeals update. There for members' information. Everybody happy with that? Yeah, thank you. I've got no urgent business this afternoon, but I would like you to sit in your seats just for a couple of minutes more, members of the committee.